Welcome back to Max Out, everybody. My guest today, I like him a great deal. He's become a good friend of mine, and we're getting to know each other even better and better. Played 9 years in the NFL, Pro Bowler, first-round draft pick. And ironically, with all of his accolades as an athlete, it's not why I wanted him on the show. I wanted him on the show because he's a good man, he's articulate, and he understands pivoting. So many of you at this time are at a stage where maybe the dream you had is on hold, or you've got to make changes, or it's over and you got to come up with a new one. And Eric Wood, more than anybody you were probably ever going to meet, can relate to that. And so, Eric, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you here, brother.
It's an honor. It's truly a pleasure to be on with you, Ed.
Yeah, Eric's also got a great podcast that I was just recently a guest on, so you can check that out too. He's doing all kinds of TV stuff for the NFL. He's a really unique man, guys. You're going to find this out in the interview. His ability to articulate his thoughts and teach you things is remarkable. Remember, again, as we go through this, you're talking about an elite level athlete. And a lot of the insights into what made him a good athlete have also made him a good husband, father, and now businessman. So let's start with the pivot first, because there are literally millions of people right now, brother, that, as you know, are like, hey, I had this dream, COVID came, or circumstances came, or a divorce came, and I got to pivot. You had the ultimate pivot. So take everybody through what happened with you. I think everyone's going to, their breath will be taken away by these moments that happened to you in your life. So tell them the story.
Yeah, so I got to play. I was a first-round draft pick to the Buffalo Bills, played my entire 9-year career with the Bills, was extended by them contract-wise twice. Before my 9th season in the NFL, it was my final year on my second deal up there. I contemplated whether I wanted to maybe hit free agency or stick around with the Buffalo Bills. They had just hired Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, and I truly trusted their vision for the organization. I signed a contract extension before my 9th season, the 2017 season. That season was special, Ed. I'll never win a Super Bowl as a player, but when you break a 17-year playoff drought in the fashion that we did down in Miami, we watched the Bengals beat the Ravens in the locker room to send us to the playoffs after we had won the game. Truly one of the most fun, joyful moments of my entire life. Awesome. We go down to Jacksonville. We lose to the Jaguars in the first round of the playoffs. And I never like to describe this as a win-win situation, but my wife was ready to pop with our son, Garrett. And so I was either going to miss the birth of my son and we were going to win in the playoffs, or I was going to be able to go home and be a part of that. So the season ends. I'm the only player on the team that played 100% of the snaps that year, which is pretty rare in the NFL, because you think you could either be beating a team really bad and get taken out, you could be losing really bad and get taken out, and then just inevitably throughout the season, your shoe could come off. But but generally it's getting hurt, realistically. Only player on the team to play 100% of the snaps. I was an alternate for the Pro Bowl, and there was 2 centers in the playoffs, so the chances of me likely going to the Pro Bowl are pretty good. So I told our team doctor, at the end of the season, everyone gets an exit physical. That's your last step before the offseason. And I said, look, I'm good. I'm the only player that played all the snaps. Send me home. I'm going to get out of here because I'm going to go catch the birth of my son. He said, well, you had these stingers this year. Just go get an MRI on your neck. I said, my buddies in high school got stingers. Like, I'm fine. Send me home. I've done the Joe Theismann leg break. I broke my other leg on Monday Night Football. I did ACL, PCL, lateral meniscus. I've been through the ringer. These are stingers. I'm fine. I reluctantly get an MRI. 2 days later, as I'm waiting in the hospital room for the birth of my son, 45 minutes before he's born, I get the news that my career is over. And Ed, it shocked me. And that happens to a lot of guys. But honestly, in that moment, I just felt cheated, because I felt like I had put in so much work to that point. I mean, I had so much joy on a day-to-day basis in that facility. I was a captain for 3 years, should have been 5. Rex Ryan doesn't do captains. He does game captains. So I should have had that big gold patch on my jersey. And I loved it. I loved everything about playing football. I loved the competitiveness, the camaraderie, the preparation. I loved it all. And in that moment, I was crushed, honestly. But I kept thinking to myself, man, God is going to do something so special with this. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to be roaring. And I don't know how many people are feeling that at this moment of their life, where COVID maybe has taken a loved one or their career, their business that they've fought so hard to build. And maybe you're not quite out of it. And I'm 3 years removed from that, Ed. And I've gotten to build these wonderful relationships. I'm in broadcasting now, which I truly love. But I think it's a constant state of pivoting, as opposed to one day when you just think, okay, I've arrived at my next step of my journey.
Really good point. I mean, I want everybody to picture this. This is a guy who got one college scholarship offer, didn't play till his junior year to get the scholarship offer, ends up being at the pinnacle of his career, signs a brand new deal in the waiting room for the birth of his son. The future's perfect. Going to have a baby, married to his dream woman, going to renew for a bunch of money. It's over. And so Eric can relate to what so many of you are going through. Now, you said something there, and I want to ask you about this. You said, the one hand, you're like, hey, this is devastating. Did you really in that same moment, go, but God's got some big plan for me? Or did this sort of occur to you with some perspective down the road? Or were you holding both thoughts at the same time?
I wish it happened in that moment. Honestly, when my son came 45 minutes later, you're so distracted from the moment. Yeah. And of course, like most players would do, we sought a bunch of different opinions from that moment on too. So over the next couple of weeks, it's this limbo of, we're watching the playoffs. My family's wondering, how are we going to get Garrett down to the Pro Bowl? He's going to be 2 weeks old, but my daughter went when she was 6 months old, and we flew her to Hawaii. So we're like, of course we can go to Orlando from Louisville, Kentucky with a 2-week-old. We'll make it work. And this whole time in my mind, I knew that it was done. I got to see the X-ray of disc and bone sitting into my spinal cord at C2, C3, and that's loss of respiratory function and paraplegia from the neck down if you have any damage. And I had it sitting into my spinal cord. I don't know why or how I wasn't affected more than just the stingers. And many doctors got to tell me that you are very lucky.
Yeah.
It's time to walk away. And they said, even with surgery, you'll never pass a physical again. So it's all for nothing.
Right. It's not going to happen.
You can keep fighting this. No one will ever clear you. And I'll give you some perspective, Ed. I know what being disabled looks like. My little brother was born with severe cerebral palsy. He never walked, talked, breathed on his own. He died when he was 11 years old. I was 14 at the time. I have a picture of what that looks like. And so to get that news and be able to picture myself in my own brother's shoes and what could have happened or should have happened, you're at this crossroads of grateful that it's not worse, but also devastated that you're faced with this.
Wow. Now, see, I did not know that about your brother. See, everybody, I want you to just hear what he said there. If you have had a dream end or a relationship end, or you're just going to have to pivot, we're going to talk about the steps Eric took here in a minute. So there's going to be some note taking as well. But, there is a hidden blessing in it. You think there's none. You don't know what could have been worse had you stayed in those circumstances. I mean, right. You never know. There could have been, driving to the place you used to work. You could have been in a car accident that you're no longer in because you don't drive there anymore. You have to have some faith that everything is happening for you and not to you. And that is a true principle of life, that God's got your back. And we'll talk about faith a little bit. But to think, brother, in all this devastating news, that you were one hit, one play, one anything, one slip in the shower, right? Like one squat wrong in the gym away from being in that situation. So there's a ton of blessing in there, but you've managed to make it a blessing. And I know, you guys, we're recording this right after the playoffs. He's watching some of his old teammates in the playoffs right now. So this is how mentally tough this guy is. But you had to remake your identity, I think, too. Or correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of times, many of us, our identity is tied to something external. So if you've had a marriage end, perhaps part of your identity was being in that relationship. Or in your case, I'm an NFL football player. Most athletes who lose a career suddenly or not suddenly have an unbelievably difficult time of ever creating a new identity. Maybe you were a high school athlete or a really good student, or you're just changing and your identity is tied to this other thing you were doing. So how did you change that, Eric? How did you change his identity from a football player into maybe the identity is not now what I do, but who I am? I'm not sure what your answer would be, but I'm really curious. I think a lot of people would like to know.
Yeah. So throughout my NFL career, I always prided myself on having a foundation outside of football in an incredible family. You mentioned I married the woman of my dreams, and, I have my family, my extended family that all supports me, great friends. I have my faith. I had some business stuff going. I had a foundation where, I'm not quite all football. I'm more than just a football player, but you realize that maybe that's not the case when it's taken away. And you find out that next morning when every day for the previous 15 years, my goal was to be the best center in the National Football League from the second I walked on the Louisville football campus. When you step into your shoes the next morning, and it doesn't matter if you go work out, it doesn't matter what time you get up. Yeah, I want to be a great dad, a great husband, but what am I trying to be the best in the world at? What am I going to try to chase? And when there's not a clear-cut vision for that, man, it's tough. And that set me on a journey to figure out what was next for me. My podcast is titled What's Next with Eric Wood, because I went on a journey to try and meet people like Ed Mylett and the countless other people to figure out what was next for me. And I got some advice early on, and that was to quit worrying about myself so much. Like, you're making this way too much about you. Get outside yourself and start serving others. And it's amazing when my mentality quit being about, man, what am I going to do next? What am I going to pivot into? How do I now be the best broadcaster? How do we take our gym to the next level? How do I lose more weight? Whatever it may be. And just start serving others. It was amazing, the people that God started to connect me with to start give me more clarity that, man, life is a journey. It's not a sprint either. You know, I'm 3 years removed from that. It's amazing that me and Ed recorded on my podcast on my son's birthday, exactly 3 years later. Ed's the biggest guest I've had on my podcast. He's the biggest guest I've had that most people will have on their podcast. He's one of the most phenomenal speakers in the world. So Ed comes on my podcast. That's 3 years. Crazy. You know what I mean? It wasn't a 1 month deal. It wasn't 1 week later. I think in my mind, when I got that injury, I said, man, God's going to do something so crazy. He gave me this platform through sports, and he's just going to take me off. Well, Monday Night Football didn't call. Monday Night Football didn't call. I wasn't speaking at that next big conference, and that's okay, because I needed to grow internally as well.
Hey guys, thanks for sticking around. If you'd like more, click the videos right here. They're exactly what you need to see next. And if you're new here, hit subscribe and become a part of the Max Out community. And tell me what you think about the videos in the comments below. I read all of them every week, and I select winners that get all kinds of prizes, gear, coaching calls with me. Make a comment.